It's always the hardest part is the smiling at the beginning. You got to have that smile, have that nice friendly face. Good morning, everybody. We're live. Congratulations. You made it through the week. Another amazing week of food safety, food quality, all the great, amazing food products that we all eat, love, and enjoy every single day. And getting that done out there is an unheralded task. But guess what? We're here to say thank you. So Matt, Francine, and myself say thanks. We appreciate all that you do. If you're new, pull up a chair. This is the Food Safety Chat Live, and every week at 8 a.m. Mountain Time, 10 a.m. Eastern, we live stream on LinkedIn and YouTube, and we do a show for you. And it's about all things food safety because, as Matt and Francine know too, food safety, right? Not a point of competition. We're all in this together. The consumers who eat our products, they don't care. They just expect safe food, and we're here to deliver it for them. So one of the things you'll notice with this is a discussion. Today is definitely going to be a discussion. This is not a presentation. This is talking about things and interacting with everybody in the audience. And that's always really the fun part of this for us, is the community and everything that we've built with us, and being able to share this information and jump over those ridiculous company walls and industry borders that we put up to share the information that we all need. So, phew, how's that for an introduction? If you're new here, everybody, please, file in here and let us know. So Elena is here. Great. And one of the things that we do here on the chat, guys, is, and we were talking about this before we went live, is where are you? And I'm in Loveland, Colorado, where it's going to be, I think, 90 degrees today. And Matt, you're a little south of me, right?
Colorado Springs.
What temperature wise for you?
That is a good question.
When we were prepping for this, it's like, so in Colorado, your yard is peak in May, and we had a really nice May, and everybody's yards looks really nice. And then the warmer weather starts hitting, and your lawn just takes it to the face, and everything just goes. It doesn't matter how much water you fertilizer, everything just goes, nah, I'm done, and everything looks like crap. So unlike Pennsylvania, Francine, where you guys have all that nice rain and moisture, and everything just grows automatically, right?
Right. It's been raining for a couple months at this point here.
Well, I saw that New York City was getting a big heat wave. Are you getting any of that there, or?
So yeah, the weather is so weird this year. It's gone from 50 to 90. There was no spring, and it's rained the entire way through, except for I've been gone the last couple of days, but apparently it didn't rain for a few days while I was away. It's raining again. We had torrential downpours last night, and actually the day that I came home. So it has rained a lot this year.
Wow.
In the Northeast,
and then,
a lot.
And that's the other side, right? Yeah, you get too much, and then you have to worry about flooding and all that.
Right. I feel bad for farmers. It's because it's not been an easy year for them. But yes.
Yeah, because then they can't get out in the fields, and everything just goes. That's a career, right? Or you are luck is a huge part of being a successful farmer. That's for sure. And get Elena here. So Ryan, good to see Ryan. Duncan, of course, over the pond in England. Good to see Duncan. Vince, welcome. New face there from Connecticut. Good to see you. And so as Ryan said, as a yard dad, my yard is loving the rain. Yeah, absolutely. So I'm actually pretty. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I want to know what time it is in England.
I think so. For us, he is with the time change. It always changes. It's either +8 or +7 for us. So it's going to be 6 for you. So it's early afternoon for Duncan. So not too bad. But that dude works all the time. I mean, so he was emailing me last night at like 11 or midnight his time, and I'm like, dude, get some sleep.
Yeah.
And another good food safety warrior, Bonnie. Good to see you as well. So. With that, let's everybody join us for a drink of your favorite beverage this morning. Grab that and let's do a cheer together. Cheers, everybody.
Cheers.
And so 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So Fancy Pants Duncan with 1500. What do you think this is? Is this the military? I don't think so. Okay, so are you guys ready for the dad joke? Ready? All right. So,
ready.
So part of this, I spoke with my lawyer, and he said that I need to add a disclaimer to this. And so I've added this now to the process. So get ready for this. So the dad joke is incoming. I have performed my fiduciary duty in the warning for that. So here comes the dad joke. All right, so it was very interesting because with this, actually, I did a little research, and this was an interesting process. And I didn't know this, but we all have ants and things in our yards, and you'll see them and everything. But it's really hard, and I didn't know you could do this. But you can actually tell the sex of an ant. Do you guys know how to do that?
No.
Yeah, it's a really easy process. So you take like a little bowl of water, you put some water in the bowl, and you take an ant and then you drop it in the water. And if the ant floats, if it sinks, if the ant sinks, it's a girl ant. And so of course, then if it floats, it's a
boy ant.
Yes.
Wow.
Isn't that
I
awesome?
was thinking we were going down some like a witch hunt here with the if the ant believes in Jesus, it floats. If the ant doesn't, it
Oh yeah, or Monty Python, right? With the witch they were going to dunk in the water.
Right, exactly.
And that dad joke is actually a contributed dad joke by one of our guests here on the chat, Morgan, which I don't see her yet, but thank you, Morgan, for the dad joke. And with that, if anybody's got any good dad jokes, yeah, send them to me. Send me your dad jokes, and we can torture people with dad jokes.
Is this where I'm supposed to say my dad joke?
You can if you like.
Since you put it in the note.
When we were talking about, I was going to say for another show because I wanted to surprise you. But you want to tell it?
No. You got it. Yeah. You use it for another show.
Yeah, because Matt had a really good one. So that one's coming up. So we'll tease that. Duncan got to the air raid shelter. Good. So, good. Comments are coming up here. I wanted to see how that works with 3 people. So that's good. So, this is gonna be a super cool show because this is very interesting because it's a weird thing, guys, what we do in food safety, because as I often talk with quality people, food safety people, what's cool about what we do is we get to poke our nose into a lot of stuff. Right, we get to go to other people's departments and say, "Hey, what you doing there, procurement guys? Let me tell you how to do what you're doing," which, of course, nobody likes. But you have to learn how to do that diplomatically. That's a whole nother show. But one of the things that we are pretty much married at the hip with, and you'll see this in food companies all the time, is quality, food safety, legal, and regulatory. And the legal and regulatory aspects of your company are super important. And one of the things that we talk about here on the chat all the time is if you're going to be effective in food safety, if you're going to be really beneficial with your company, you have to look ahead. You have to look into the future. Excuse me. And you have to be able to help the company see problems that are coming. And really, the politics and management of food safety is a prime example of that, isn't it, guys?
Yes.
I mean, we were talking about this yesterday, and we were emailing some stuff back and forth. So, Secretary Kennedy, drink a coffee here, is now holding some press conferences, and he's talking about what we're all seeing. So, removal of dyes from different products, and what's going on with vaccines, and all these type of it's just flying now. All this type of activity. And Kennedy said something which I thought, and Matt, you saw this as well. He's saying good news, right? Food companies that we're meeting with, and I saw more information this morning with like Nestle and Kraft and other large food companies are voluntarily saying, yes, we'll comply with what you're doing, which is, we'll talk about this more too. This is one of the tools government has in their toolkit is the hammer, right? It's like, don't make me bring down the hammer. If you do this on your own, we're going to be happy. But if you don't, we're going to make you do it. So, pay me now, pay me later type approach.
Right.
And this is what I think we're seeing with Secretary Kennedy. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes. 100%.
And it's greatly influencing how things are going. So imagine now you're in a food company and all of a sudden the CEO comes in and says, well, guess what? Pick out all the food dyes, throw in some other stuff. Now the R&D guys are in a massive tizzy right now. They've got to reformulate all their products. Labels have to change. And the food people, the food safety people now all of a sudden have new suppliers, right? So let's say that you're making dyes and different things for food companies, you're a flavor house. Everything's got to be reformulated. Everything's got to be changed, and it's got to be done now, right? So this stuff ends up impacting us in food safety very quickly, doesn't it?
Yes. Yeah, because particularly if whatever the new food dye you have has an allergen or whatever, then that needs to be listed on there. But also just that whole label process now is a big deal that needs to be checked, because a little around 1/3 of all recalls in the United States are from mislabeling of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So it always seems to be like the end where they're like, oh, hey, we need to get this on the package. We need to get this done now, blah, blah, blah. And then it's like, oh, yeah, we should probably have like food safety and compliance check this out, huh?
Yeah. So, well, and then they say something like, oh, by the way, this is going to the printer in like 3 hours. So can you give us a quick check? And you're just like, what? You know,
Yeah. Well, there's edits to this thing now, so I think we should hold the presses, guys.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we're kind of diving into this topic, and I wanted to apologize here because I should have done this, and I got so excited to get to our topic that I didn't do it. And I just kind of assumed that everybody knows who you guys are. So, so Matt and Francine, with your podcast, Don't Eat Poop, and everything that you do, can you give everybody here kind of a little introduction of who you are and what you do? I feel bad.
Oh,
yeah, go for it, Francine. No.
So, Francine, I've worked in the food service industry for my entire life, which at this point is a really long time. I started out in retail. And at this point, there's not a part of the industry that I've not worked in: regulatory, academia, everything. I've done inspections, third-party inspections, second-party inspections. And at this point, we're the co-hosts of the Don't Eat Poop podcast. That was a really quick summary.
Which is awesome, by the way. Definitely watch it.
Yeah. And so Francine and I have known each other for a long time. When we first started talking together, she was more on the retail side and I was more on the supplier side. So she and I would work on projects together, like hand each other off projects or whatever. And then we ended up talking more and more and more on the phone. And then we're like, hey, these conversations I think are kind of funny and definitely informative. Like I learned something new every time I talked to Francine. I don't know if she felt the same way.
Yeah.
And then I was like, but then Francine was like, hey, maybe we should record these. I think people would probably like our conversation. And I was like, yeah, like family and friends, maybe a dozen people. And then Francine was like, no, I know a guy. Let's go. Let's create a podcast. And so we got all the way to the point of creating the podcast. And then we were like, well, what should we name this podcast? And she and I came up with like a bunch of food safety names. And then I was like, what about Don't Eat Poop? There's this professor named Doug Powell, which I think we're going to end up interviewing shortly. And he always said, don't eat poop, like in a bunch of presentations. And it was just, I don't know, it just hit my humor like 20 years ago. Cause my humor hasn't changed since I was 12 years old. And so I was like, this is great. And so that's how we ended up naming our podcast, Don't Eat Poop.
Oh, I never made that connection because, yeah, I mean, so Dr. Powell, when I first met, well, I don't think I ever actually met him, but he was at Guelph and he was putting out the Food Safety Net report with all, all the recalls. And that was my lifeline early in my career of what's going on in the industry and how do you keep track? I think he's been in Australia now for quite a while, but that's really cool that you're going to interview him. And that all came out of, and this is something that's really important. And I think this is a really good service that we provide with what we're doing here is I had a really good auditor who came into my plant and he said, okay, Bryan, this is great. You have this HACCP plan and all this stuff that you're doing with your teams. How are you keeping everybody up to date on the changes? And I'm like, that's a really good question. So I started putting together like a weekly report that I would send out to all my plants of what was going on from Doug. And that just grew from there. And I've just kept it going from this point, right? So the technology changes, but what we're sharing here remains the same.
Yeah, and he was unique in probably still is, but he was unique in really driving home to the lowest common denominator, the fastest route to get people's attention, what we do in food safety. And when he speaks, he doesn't hold back. And when he wrote his blog, Barf Blog, I think it was Barf Blog for many years, it was the same way. Like it was kind of in your face. And so, yeah, it's kind of what our podcast is like.
Well, and it's just a perfect illustration of how, we all share and grow and learn from each other. And we're all here today because of what Dr. Powell did. So thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Powell.
Mariana, just thank you for being here. It mentioned that we interviewed you as well on the podcast, episode 106. So, if people would like to check that out, you were.
Absolutely. So with our topic today, which is going to be wide ranging for sure, one of the things we kind of wanted to, first off, give kind of an overview of this confusing, because this is where food safety and politics cross over. How does this process work? And the clearest example early, and so Matt, I'll throw it to you when we get to this, is a lot of people don't understand even how the regulatory process works. So the biggest example that most people understand is the Food Safety Modernization Act. So there was some high profile issues. People got mad. Congress said, we need to do something. And they put together the Food Safety Modernization Act. They created a law. President Obama signed it. Okay, great. Now what? Right? And that's when the work starts behind the scenes. So then regulations are written. And I think that's the good first question to kind of start that piece with that. What is a regulation, Matt? What's that versus a law?
Yeah. So in fact, I was just having this conversation yesterday. I have a conversation a lot with my current job of, I run a company called Ellipse Analytics, and we're the certification and testing arm for a Clean Label project. And a lot of our clients fall under a lot of different regulations. So a lot of our clients are baby food. A lot of our clients are supplements. And so each of those have very, very, very different regulations and expectations. And what people don't realize is they think, for instance, that RFK has a lot of influence, but he doesn't have, he has a lot of change within his department, but it's not like the executive branch can just create laws. So like right now, just most recently, beforehand he could, okay? So it wasn't supposed to, but it could. So right now, the way the structure works is the Congress, if we're looking at federal level, Congress and the Senate have to pass a bill. And then from that bill, the USDA, the EPA, the FDA, et cetera, they're the ones that then create regulations wrapped around the expectations from Congress. So RFK, the reason why the government is moving right now, why corporations are moving right now to change formulations and stuff, is not because they have to yet. It's because they realize that is going down the pike. And it's more the state governments that are influencing what's happening right now with regulation of food than it is the federal government. So the state governments can move a lot faster. So we see that with California Proposition AB 899, Maryland's Rudy law, which is basically a very like a cookie cutter of AB 899, which is transparency testing for baby food. So every baby food company has to test for heavy metals, and they have to post that on their website. They don't have to if they decide not to sell to California or Maryland. So like one of my clients is a Hawaiian baby food corporation. They don't have, they're local. All they do is sell to Hawaii. They do not have to abide by AB 899. But every company that sells to California or sells to Maryland and other states that are following suit then have to abide by that law. What makes no sense to say, you know what, I'm just going to cut out a Canadian-sized population like California and not sell there, right? It just doesn't make sense. So they're going to do that. So some of the fastest food expectations of food laws are coming from states. And that then forces the companies to reformulate and all that different type of stuff as well. Because if they're going to reformulate for one state, like California or somebody else, then they might as well just reformulate across the board.
Yeah,
So RFK and his groups are really good at getting consumer advocacy out, that then consumer advocacy pushes state departments create laws a lot easier than the federal government does, and then that forces companies to change practices in order to meet those laws in those states, which then changes the nation as a whole. Federalism tends to work occasionally. So yeah, because I mean, as you guys know, like it's really hard to get Congress to do anything. The gridlock there is huge. So it's a lot easier to move in state departments.
Right. And yeah, that's an important distinction, is that states like California, it's kind of the tail wagging the dog in that scenario. So they will create state laws, but because a food company can't have separate formulations. Okay, we'll only sell this in California and then we'll sell these other products everywhere else. It's just not practical. And so they will formulate just for those one things. So yeah, it's an important distinction that in food safety we need to understand is laws are pretty vague, right? It'll just say you shall do this, but it doesn't say how to do it. So then these states or the federal agencies involved, EPA, FDA, USDA, all these alphabet soup guys, then have to figure out what the heck that means. And the other really interesting piece with this as well is the regulators don't necessarily know what to write. And this then Matt gets into, well, is the influence of trade organizations and things like this. And so I was involved with the Consumer Brands Association, which at the time was GMA, Grocery Manufacturers Association. And I was part of a committee with a lot of really smart people that were working on putting together recommendations to FDA for foreign supplier verification under when FSMA was created and 2.1 and all that fun stuff. So then we would create our thoughts on how the regulation should be created. And then we would meet with FDA and say, well, here's what we're thinking on how you should do this. And then there would be a lot of back and forth. So the public never sees that, do they?
No, but then after that whole entire process, which is the reason why after 10 years, they're still rolling out Food Safety Modernization Act or FSMA, right? Because it's a long process, and the people who create these rules, and they're called rules. So like the traceability rule that I was a consultant on was FSMA 204 with Andy Kennedy. And that then they create rules that are based on the regulation legislation. And then those rules dictate how the FDA is going to enforce the legislation into a regulation. So they go through all of that stuff where they're talking with people like Bryan, and they're going to the industry and they're getting ideas. They're bringing in a bunch of stuff to get ideas. Then they write the rule, which that rule process could take a year. It could take a couple of years. It could take a while. Then they write the rule. Then that rule goes out for comments. So, like with FSMA 204, I think there was like 1,800 comments. 900 made it publicly because a bunch of the comments are like, why the F are you doing this to me? Blah, blah, blah. So the federal government's not going to really post that, or, like that type of stuff. So then they post, the comments get posted, and then the FDA's feedback to each of those comments are there as well. So you can kind of see not all of them, but a lot of the ones where there's clarity in the rule, right? So then that comes back, and then they will spend time rewriting that rule. That could take 90 days. It could take 180 days. It could take a long time, but usually it takes around 90 days, that comment period. Then they go and they review it, then they write it. They may edit the rule, post it back out. And then there's usually a timeline for expectation of when the rule will actually be regulated against.
Yeah.
And that timeline is usually years in advance. So then the whole industry has time to retool, recalibrate, reformulate, get the technology they need, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then during that time, the FDA has the ability to extend that expectation, which they did with FSMA 204. So that's why it takes forever for the FDA to actually regulate anything. It because there's that back and forth. And because really, truly, I mean, the FDA, when they're writing the rules, tend to lump in a lot of different commodities, or when the USDA writes a rule, they're lumping in. USDA is a little easier because there's less things, but the FDA is kind of more broad. Well, then they have to figure out, how are we going to enforce this for each of the different supply chains, for each of the different types of food that's being created, being produced, being processed, manufactured, et cetera, et cetera. How are we then going to go out and see if the industry is doing their job correctly? So there's usually some way in which they're doing that. And that just takes forever. And the FDA continues to complain that they don't have enough resources. So even when the rule actually gets implemented and the timeline is completed and the industry has to now abide by it, who's actually making sure that they're doing that?
Right.
And that's complicated.
Yes.
So I just want to mention something else, and it's from a little bit of a different angle. People also, there's a misconception that the FDA food code is law, and it's not.
No.
You know what I mean? States determine whether or not they're going to accept the food code and what portion of the food code they're going to adopt. So that's a whole other piece of all of this as well.
Right. And that's why, and that's a good point, Francine. That's why when FDA writes a warning letter, they'll always point back to the regulation or the law that says, okay, you cannot produce adulterated or misbranded food under this law. And then they'll go from there, and then the regulations cascade from there. You'll always see that in a warning letter. Cortland brings up a good point here that we touched on as well, is guidance document, right? So a lot of times, Matt, in this process, they will put together guidance document, which they think is their best guess, right? So for example, Appendix 1 with the hazard analysis with FSMA, they put out a guidance document around that. They'll put information out there to say, okay, this is not something as an agency we are going to hold you to, but this is coming, right? So you better be ready for it, because guidance turns into regulation.
Right, which is like the like in 1998 when the federal government came out with good manufacturing practices, good agricultural practices guidance documents. Yeah. And so then ultimately those guidance documents morphed into FSMA. So then the Congress actually took those guidance documents and said, hey, you know what, let's turn this into an actual law. And so that's it. The guidance documents aren't the full law. There's a lot more into Food Safety Modernization Act, but it was definitely used as a tool for Congress's law.
Yeah, and I think that's an important call out here to make sure everybody caught that, and it's very important. Is a lot of times you see this in third-party certification standards as well, GFSI or things like this. A lot of times auditors or investigators, regulatory or third-party, will go off the reservation. They will try to hold you to something that isn't actually actionable. So you need to understand the difference between guidance and enforceable regulation. But if they're doing that, you can pull them back in and say, okay, well, I understand what you're saying there, Mr. FDA investigator, but that's part of guidance. That's not enforceable yet. And they can't cite that against you. You have to understand that.
That's true, but third parties can.
Yeah.
So like when I was at Primus Labs, we used the FDA guidance to create our own audit. And so then if you wanted to be Primus audited and get that on your, like to say you are, so you can go sell to your customers, then you have to then abide by those expectations. So that's the other thing too, which is kind of cool. When the FDA or the USDA or whatever creates their guidance documents, then retailers say, hey, listen, I don't want my suppliers to be doing things that are against the guidance expectations. How do they do that? Then they go and work with third-party auditing companies, and ultimately that led to GFSI, Global Food Safety Initiative, that then created standards, and then those auditing companies, certification bodies audited to those standards, like SQF, like BRC, like Primus, GFS, like Global Gap, et cetera, et cetera. And it was not driven by the federal government. It was driven by industry.
Yeah. And yeah, I refer to this as you need to understand the rules of the game that you're playing by. And that's really what our conversation is focusing around here today. Is what am I being judged against? What's that standard? Is it SQF? Is it FSMA? Is it a customer requirement, right? We also have, let's say Costco has their addendum of what they want people audited to. You need to understand what is it that you're complying with so that you can correctly answer those questions and make sure that you're in compliance in those areas. It gets very confusing, and we're not even talking about international. Right? Now let's get into what EU and craziness and all of that. And really, Francine, kind of the way I like to think about these type of things is kind of different buckets. And it's always a good way to look at your quality and your food safety programs and all these type of things in your operations in different buckets. How do I comply with food safety versus how do I comply with quality? They're very different. So for example, allergens, it's a food safety impact, as Matt was talking about earlier. If you have a mislabeled allergen on your label, recall, right? There's no questions, ifs, ands, or buts about that. Okay, Brian, what's a quality regulation you need to be worried about? Weights and measures, right? Is a generally a state enforced requirement that says your package, and there's all kinds of rules you can read through with the National Institute for Standards and Technology, NIST, of stated weight versus package weight. There's all these rules that you have to follow. And a lot of times state regulators, there's some states that are notorious for doing this. So North Carolina, New Jersey, as examples, they'll go out and they'll pull your products off shelves and weigh them and say, oh, you're out of compliance, pay us some money, right? That's a state regulation that's under quality. You're not going to make anybody sick, but you have to comply with that, right, Francine?
100%. And I think that, well, and Matt probably knows more about those types of things than what I do, because his background is different than what mine is. I came from retail, he came from manufacturing and processing. So, but yeah, I mean, all of these regulations work hand in hand, and it's just, we have to follow all of them, regardless of what it is that we're working on. And the quality impact and I can speak more to allergens, for example. Like Matt said, 30% of the recalls are due to labeling, and most of those are because of the allergens, and allergens are a big deal. So, we just, when it comes to all of the problems that we're having, and my mind just went totally blank because I don't deal with weights and measures, Brian.
Nobody likes weights and measures.
Yeah. I don't deal with weights and measures. And that's the bottom line.
Well, and really, I think from your retail background, another good example of this then is what Matt's working on the traceability. So from a retail, so I'll ask you to put your retail hat on this. And this is my take on this. And we'll see if you agree. Is FDA came out with all this guidance document. Here's how we want enhanced traceability to work. Here's what we consider high risk foods. And then there's everything else. And you need to have all these programs in place for backwards traceability, key indicators and all this fun stuff. If I'm a retailer, Francine, I'm looking at this and saying, oh, okay, so all my suppliers, of which I have thousands of suppliers in my business, they want me to set up two different systems for traceability, and I need to manage those. Am I really going to do that? Or am I going to go back to all my suppliers and say, I want one system and we're going to comply with the most stringent standard? So even though I'm not in a high risk food, I think, oh, hey, okay, I don't make produce. I'm cool. Probably not, right? Does that make sense?
100%. They're not going to set up multiple systems. They want to use one system. There's so much to deal with on the retail side of things as it is. And they've got so many different things that they're trying to work with their suppliers. And, to try to implement multiple systems, they're not going to do that. There's nobody that's going to try to do that. They're going to implement one system, and they're going to do it systematically in the easiest, most efficient way they can possibly do it.
Yeah.
And that's how it's going to
be. And now lay over the top of that, Kroger has their system, HEB has their system, Piggly Wiggly has their system, right? Everybody's got their own system. So how do you manage that?
There are multiple companies out there that are working on integrations of how these systems can all work from the from the farmer
Mm-hmm.
clear back to the retail, and in ways that they can all be integrated so that you can trace a product from the time that it's picked till it hits the shelves. And there are systems out there, and I don't want to get into naming companies, where these whether it be they can use codes, they can use just everybody wants to use one system that's going to work, and it's going to work within the government entities as well. I've had multiple conversations at different think tanks, with the FDA groups, with USDA groups, when we've been at conferences and we've sat there. And one of the problems that they have, and their biggest problem and their biggest concern, is these things are expensive. They want one platform that's going to work across, whether they're working with a produce supplier, whether they're working with a meat packaging company, where they can integrate all of these companies onto one platform.
Yeah.
And Matt.
No. I agree with you. And the interesting thing with the traceability rule was with FSMA 204, the traceability rule, is that the FDA was asking for the industry to go from tracing things by SKUs to tracing things by lot.
Yeah.
That's a huge difference, because while the farmer and the manufacturer and everything traces things by lot, distribution traces everything by SKU. And so where the law was having an issue was the distribution side of things. So the industry is looking at how do we make this work for everybody. And to Francine's point, like they're tracking things by using EDI, having the systems integrate. So I just found out recently that a lot of the systems are talking to each other for free, so that if or low cost. So if somebody is using one system and somebody else is using another system to track, in order to maintain consistency throughout the supply chain as one product moves, because a lot of people don't know, but produce and food in general changes hands. It could be one time, but a lot of times it's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 times before it actually gets onto the grocer's shelf or into your restaurant's meal. And so that whole entire tracking process, it was the most complicated expectation of this whole entire thing. Because the way the FDA said we're going to track this is if there's an outbreak, and after tracking through epidemiology, we've weaned it down to a couple commodities, we're going to find out where those commodities came from, and we're going to go straight to not to the source, but to where the consumers bought it. So the retailer and the restaurants have to provide the FDA an electronic sortable spreadsheet within 48 hours. Yes, 48 hours of the FDA's request. So there's no way to do that. The retailers, the grocers, and the food service companies can't do that without a system that could track it all the way down to the lot, all the way down to the field, or the processing plant that provided that product, without some sort of consistency within that data. So that is all being worked out. The FDA provided an extension on that for 18 months. So it was supposed to be January 20th, 2026. Looks like it's now going to be July of 2028. So yeah, it's crazy.
And when we first started working on these systems, they were super expensive. Nobody could afford them. The only people that could afford them were your Walmarts and your Targets and these super large companies. And that was a problem for the smaller companies because they were just out of reach. They were too out of reach. Another thing that is impacting is AI. You know,
Yeah, AI is going to be huge.
now, people think this is a bad word, and it really isn't, but it's making things much easier, much more affordable, and much more attainable. So that is also changing the way a lot of this stuff is functioning. And AI is moving faster than anybody ever thought that it was going to. And that changes the way a lot of these programs are working at this point.
Right. Yeah, I think that's part of what we've been going through, right? Because if we look back a year or so ago, blockchain, blockchain is going to solve everything, right? Okay, maybe not. And so for me, at the bottom line, I think Francine, you did a great job of illustrating that, is what FDA has essentially asked us to do is we've created systems over time that track things forward. Here's our ingredients, and we make some stuff and we send it to a retailer. I can track one forward, one back. Yay, I'm good. FDA has said, yeah, that's great, but we want you to go backwards now.
Yeah.
We want you to go from, hey, I'm a consumer, I'm sick, to where that was actually processed in 48 hours. And it's not created for that.
And when we first started talking about this as well, companies weren't willing to share any of this information. Like they would not talk to each other, and they would not, like I said, I've been doing this for a really long time. They wouldn't share any information with one another. And now companies are more open about sharing what's working for them.
Yeah.
Because it makes life a whole lot easier.
Yeah. And there's egos, right? So Walmart is saying, I want my system. And to your point, Target is saying, no, you suck. Everybody should follow our system. Of course they want that. And so the big dogs are all fighting it out, and then everybody else is going to have to comply with whatever raises to the top.
Right. And it will end up being third-party systems that are going to do that. Like the one that I worked with before becoming CEO of Ellipse Analytics and working with Clean Label Project was iFood DS. So iFood DS is one of them. Repositrack. There's going to be some that are going to be the top leaders, and they're going to work together because they have to. In order to comply with, because each of them are going to end up getting their own retailers and their own food service companies. And they're going to use them because they like the UI, they like the network or something like that. And they're going to choose those systems, or they're going to choose their own. And then those third-party systems in between have to then feed that information to that retailer that decides to do it on their own. It just is what it is.
So I helped, as I was talking about this, I helped develop a system that was doing this traceability. So I was thinking, as I was talking about that, Matt can testify to that. I was thinking about how we were developing the traceability and how all those pieces were working together, to help the technology that we were building to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and what's interesting with this whole process, and really everything that we're talking about here around enhanced traceability is the perfect example of what we're trying to illustrate here today. Is you have to understand what's going on, because like it or not, if you're working in food safety for a food company, this is going to impact you. And you need to be able to make sure that your senior leadership is aware of what's going on in the company. Because if all of a sudden one day, all of your customers come to you and say, congratulations, we've figured this whole thing out. You need to install these new systems into your operations for traceability. And we need it done at that point in time, it's going to be, we want that done in 3 months, right? And now all of a sudden the company has to spend all this money and completely revise. Now imagine for using SAP or something, you're a bigger food company. Good luck, right? Figuring that out. How do you integrate all these type of things? The golden rule in any company is don't surprise me, right? And so as part of this, we need to be the vanguard in food safety and food quality regulatory groups that are looking at these things to let our companies know what's going on. And what we're talking about here is who in your company is involved with these activities, who is putting their ear to the ground and joining trade associations and going to committee meetings and sitting in on presentations at conferences, and then bringing that information back to your company and getting involved. Because either you're going to be part of the process or the process is going to be part of you. You need to figure out which side of that you want to be on.
And that's where we are right now too. So when we all first started our career, we would hear about outbreaks all the time because that was part of our job, right?
Yeah.
But the consumers didn't hear about outbreaks. They really didn't, unless it was a big multi-state outbreak with that was like knocking off a bunch of people. Sorry, that's something we use in our podcast. Making a lot of people sick or killing people. Nobody knew about it. Then all of a sudden it was a sensational news story. The news would run with it, and then they'd hear about it for a week or so, and then it would die down. Today, the food safety world has to realize that the FDA and the USDA and the different state departments that followed suit, the FDA was ahead of consumers 20 years ago. Now they're behind consumers because consumers have their own outlets to media that didn't exist 20 years ago, 30 years ago.
Right.
And so now consumers can hear about outbreaks like the second they're happening. Now consumers can that have an issue with something like food dyes, et cetera, can come out, or heavy metals or whatever, can come out, create their own podcast, create their own YouTube channel, can create their own special interest group, and blast it out to the world. Food law is going to change faster. Food compliance expectations are going to change faster than they ever have, because we live in a democracy. And so consumers want this. And Francine and I talk about this a lot on our podcast, that they are a vocal, large minority. They're still the minority. Most people don't really care. But there are a good 20, 30, 35% of our population that they wake up, they eat, breathe, sleep, drink food safety in their own vision, right? Yeah. And they're getting a lot of people to follow suit, which then pressurizes the our electoral process. Right. So that's why we're seeing a lot more movement in state departments, which is why we're seeing MAHA become a thing, and really pushing and influencing the market to move before they can get the actual laws changed federally and ultimately create regulations behind it. But that is going to happen. It may take a while, but I see a lot of these. I see the industry actually pushing the federal government faster. Right now, the lobbyists are going against all these food laws. I see in the future that these huge food lobbyists actually pressuring the federal government to make changes, because they don't want 14 different changes in 14 different states saying 14 different things. Right. And so it's going to push Congress to actually pass something. Both Democrats and Republicans are probably going to agree on something for once, and it's going to be because money is behind it, right? Yeah. And then so they're going to get lobbyists from the food manufacturing, from the grocers, from NRA, not the gun association, but the restaurant association, saying, you know what, actually, guys, uncle, consumers have spoken, states have moved. We need to federalize this thing so that we're not having 14 different things happening in 14 different states that we have to now, because there's only so much. The biggest impact of food right now is food labeling. There's only so much real estate on a package. And right now, their state departments are asking, or state legislators are asking, to fill this thing up with a bunch of different codes and labels and claims and all that different type of stuff. And if they have to do a different one for every state, there's just not going to be room for the label on there that tells what the product is. So it's a huge difference.
Right. And so yeah, to kind of reflect back on what you were saying, there is money, right? Influence, yes, and squeaky wheel. So for example, an example of an industry that doesn't have a lot of influence, and so it's stuck in limbo. And it's a perfect example of this process is we were talking about that as we were getting ready for the show, is raw milk. You've got some strong opinions on raw milk, right? And you've got, and what we've been dancing around here, but we haven't really talked about a whole lot, is groups out there that are lobbying for these things and want these things. So you have different groups, raw milk people, and then you have animal ethics people who are sneaking onto farms and doing films and trying to influence public opinion. But for the raw milk thing, There's people that want it, and there's other people on the food safety side that are saying that's not a really good idea. And so a lot of times if the federal government doesn't want to do that, then it defers to the state. And we're seeing lots and lots of different activities in states around raw milk. Some states are, oh, yeah, do what you want. Other states, completely no. And it's just this big mess. And I really, with the raw milk, I'm kind of curious on this one to get your opinion, guys. Is raw milk just going to be stuck in this limbo land because it doesn't have the horsepower to move it forward at the federal level?
Go for it, Francine.
I think RFK is pushing raw milk based on what I saw yesterday. He's doing shots of raw milk.
Oh, yeah, it's crazy. So part of
I don't see it changing. I don't see raw milk becoming legal federally. And this is one of those things that it becomes really interesting is, what is the goal of the FDA? Well, the FDA wants to make sure people don't die.
Right.
That is like the number one goal of the FDA. I mean, theoretically, that is the number one goal of the FDA. Some people still believe it. Others, I don't know. I'm not quite sure. But so they're going to have issues if they say raw milk is legal, but you can still have E. coli and Salmonella and Listeria and Campylobacter and all this different type of stuff in your raw milk. So they want to get rid of that, right? They ultimately, or I should say, the USDA on that side wants to not have that in there, and so. Also, the dairy lobby is really huge. When we talk about money, the dairy lobby doesn't. All of the industries want to push more towards a monopoly. It just is what it is. And so anything that can make a product more monopolistic, they're going to push for that to happen and consolidation to happen. I don't think that that's a good thing. I disagree with that. That's why we are where we are, where JBS can get a virus, a computer virus from Russia, and shut down 1/3 of our meat supply during COVID, right? Like if we didn't have that consolidation where you have to have a USDA inspector in every single meat packing plant for every single shift, we wouldn't have consolidation. That much consolidation. Consolidation would still happen, but we wouldn't have that much consolidation. The dairy industry is going to push back on raw milk because it's a way of impeding competition as well. There's also there's no reason for the USDA to allow this to happen, and then all of a sudden say, oh, you're not protecting the consumers against all these pathogens, and that should be one of your number one jobs, right? So there's a lot of competing factors about raw milk becoming legal federally. But that's where states can change things, and that's where it becomes really, really interesting.
What state?
I'm sorry, go ahead. No, please.
There was this state last year that raw milk, they weren't allowing the sale of raw milk, and then they decided they were going to allow the sale of raw milk. Do you remember what state that was?
It's like every state.
Yeah. I mean, Oregon has done a lot around it. Yeah. I mean, so Ryan here was talking about Wisconsin. Yeah. I mean, it's all these little things pop up all over the place. It's crazy, right? And yeah, if you want to start a fight, go on X or something like this and find somebody who's advocating for raw milk and tell them they're wrong. Yeah.
And it's fascinating because I started my career in dairy. There's no way that let me rephrase this. There's definitely a way at which you can raise dairy cows to not have any bacteria in their milk. That would be very, very expensive. Yes. Right now, cows, even organic cows, are lying in their own poop, right? Like they literally are. It just is what it is. And so there's no way to get rid of that without pasteurization. There are federal laws that don't allow antibiotics in milk. So it's not like you can give your cows a constant stream of antibiotics, which is a good thing because we don't want to be consuming antibiotics through milk and then becoming resistant to antibiotics as well. So that is a good thing. But all the things that could get pathogens out of milk require huge changes in the process, in the system, et cetera, that are totally unrealistic on a large scale. So, it just is what it is.
Yeah. So with that, and now pile organic reg is on top of that, different topic. But I definitely, there's one more subject I wanted to talk about, and we're getting short here on time, is there's a lot of confusion around this. I want to make sure people understand how this impacts us from a regulatory standpoint in food. And that's Looper Bright, Chevron deference. And you throw these terms out and people are like, whoa, what is that? So in a nutshell, and we'll get your comments, guys, on this as well, so Looper Bright, what the heck is Looper Bright? It was a fishing company in New Jersey. And there was a case where they were being regulated by the local agency, and the local agency was short on funds. And they said, oh, hey, we require you in our regulations to have an inspector on your ship when you're out there on the ocean fishing. And you have to pay us $700 every day to pay for that inspector. And this fishing company went, what? That's insane. You can't do that to us. And it went to the court, and it went all the way to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court said, you can't do that. And there was a ruling that went back to the early 80s called the Chevron ruling. Yes, the petroleum thing.
Yep.
And essentially what this said was, we allow deference to regulatory agencies to create regulations based on their expertise. And so these regulatory agencies have gone out of bounds in a lot of different ways relative to their authority. And this goes back to what we started with. You have a law, then you create regulations to enforce the law. Well, they started creating more regulations and saying more things. And the Supreme Court struck that down. Huge. And what's interesting with this, I think a lot of people don't understand, is you can now, under this ruling with the Supreme Court, if you're a food company, this goes back to big food companies, right? Because they have the funds and the horsepower to do this. If a food company feels that a regulatory agency has gone out of bounds, so let's say, we'll keep with our earlier example, 204, enhanced traceability, food companies or retailers or whoever can now sue the government under this ruling to say, no, you can't do that. You're going beyond your authority, but you have to sue.
Yes.
Do you agree? Does that make sense?
Yes, but I don't think it'll work for FSMA 204 because the FDA did a really good job of writing the rule based upon the expectations from Food Safety Modernization Act's legislation. But there's a lot of other things. So the FDA and the USDA haven't gone as rogue in regulations as some of the other departments like EPA has with the Chevron case 20 years ago. Where they went and created a whole bunch of regulation that there was really no legislation tied to. With FSMA 204, I know there are like cases going through. I don't feel like that's going to hold water because of the way the rule was written. But this goes back to exactly what we were talking about with like RFK. RFK is an influencer. He's going to get things done. But it's like he's going to do a lot of things to change a lot of stuff in health and human services. But being able to make raw milk legal nationwide, that would take more of a legislative thing for food dyes to become, because of this new expectation. Before this, which just happened recently, this new case you're talking about. So we're talking about with the last couple of years, this now hinders the federal government, the executive branch, from creating expectations out of thin air. So all of these things that we're talking about being changed, the FDA, the USDA, for us in the food side of things, we can't just go in carte blanche, take RFK's expectations or ideas and turn them into expectations. It has to become law.
Yeah,
the states can. The states can.
Right. So that's a good summary, right? Because we're almost out of time here, and this is absolutely flown. So closing thoughts here, guys. What would you like to leave everybody with our conversation here today, which was fantastic, by the way?
My closing thoughts are we didn't even touch the tip of the tip of the tip of the iceberg that we can see above water, let alone the rest of it below.
Yeah.
There's a lot to talk about.
Absolutely. I mean, so my takeaway on this is you have to pay attention to this stuff. It's complicated, it's convoluted, it's confusing, but you have to stay ahead of the curve. You have to know what's coming. You're in the Titanic, and that iceberg, you're heading toward that iceberg. You need to know it's out there, and you need to know when you need to change the ship if you can. Right?
I would also add that follow consumer insight groups, follow what RFK and Maha are saying, follow what the groups within your states that you work with are saying, because you don't want to wait until the federal government decides to change something. You're really going to just follow it and see what you can do internally as over a long period of time. Like start looking at what formulations may be able to change over the next 5 years, knowing that it's a lot easier to do that over a long period of time and make sure your suppliers can do whatever new formulation you want, or you need new suppliers and make sure those people are good. Then all of a sudden this happening, and then you have to figure it out in 2 years.
Exactly. And don't forget, pay attention to shows like the Food Safety Chat and Don't Eat Poop to get good information. So with that, guys, we're going to bring our chat to a close here for today. Fantastic. Thank you, Francine. Thank you, Matt. Amazing conversation. Really, really enjoyed this. And unfortunately, I wish we had more time, but we don't. But we'll be back.
The comments are hilarious, by the way. Oh my gosh.
What's that? Oh yeah,
the comments and this. Oh my land, Duncan, that was hilarious. Thank you. Holy
absolutely.
cow.
Thank you, everybody. We greatly appreciate it. So, of course, we'll be back here next Friday at the same time on LinkedIn and YouTube, 8 a.m. Mountain Time, 10 a.m. Eastern. We'll have more amazing guests like Francine and Matt on the show to bring you the information that you need to be successful in what you do. But in the meantime, have a great weekend. Enjoy yourself. Enjoy the sun. Get out there. Have a great time. And we'll do it all again next week. Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Francine. Thank you, everyone. Have a great one.
Thank you.
Yeah.